Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a recent news that is coming from Russia, where it has indicated that it is going to pull out from the CTBT. Now, CTBT stands for the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty that regulates the nuclear testing, nuclear weapons testing. And in this video, we are going to discuss in detail that what is CTBT, why it was signed by many countries, what is the we can say what is the viewpoint of India as far as the CTBT stands, and what can be the ramifications of major country pulling out from such treaty. So let us try to understand first of all about the CTBT briefly. So to understand the context in which we are discussing today's news, we can see that recently held Valdai Forum that was held in Russia, President Vladimir Putin of Russia has indicated that it might revoke its ramification to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. He also has said the country would do so not because it wanted to resume nuclear weapons testing, but rather to bring Russia at the same level terms as United States. And what does it mean? Basically, it means that if we talk about the signatories of the CTBT, and US, Russia both are signatory of CTBT, while Russia already had ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty in year 2000, while United States still has not done the same. And that is why Putin has indicated that Russia will also do the same and can revoke its ratification of the CTBT. Now, apart from that, if we try to understand about CTBT briefly, what does it mean? So, as we can see, it is basically a multilateral treaty that bans all kind of nuclear explosion, whether it is being done for the military purposes or whether it is being done for the peaceful purposes. Not only that, it also is something that is adopted at the level of United Nations General Assembly in year 1996, just after the end of Cold War. Basically, it is believed that UN had taken advantage of the simmering, we can say simmering of the tension between the two superpowers at that time, Soviet Union and United States, and thus was very helpful in formulating and adopting the CTBT. Then overall, if we talk about total 18 countries are there that are yet to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Ratification basically deals with the process, or basically it is a kind of process through which a state or a nation, we can say, indicates it consents to bound to a particular treaty. So let us try to understand on the world map that what is the status of different countries with respect to CTBT. So as we can see, if you look at the major countries, first of all, if you come to India and then you can see Pakistan, both are colored red. What does this basically mean is that both India and Pakistan are included in Annex 2 of the treaty and both are non-signatory of the treaty. That means both countries have refused to sign the CTBT. Apart from that, if you look at the status of US and China, both are shaded in the green color, which means that these countries also are included in Annex 2 of the CTBT. However, they have both signed the treaty but have refused or still have not ratified the treaty. On the other hand, if you look at the Russia and most of the countries of the European Union, they are shaded in blue color, which means that they are not Annex 2 anymore, because all these countries have signed and ratified this particular treaty. And then we have Annex 2 signed and ratified, and then in Africa we have non-Annex 2 countries where both have signed, where all the countries have signed and ratified this particular treaty. And thus, by looking at this color-coded diagram, you can understand, or color-coded map, you can understand the status of different countries with respect to this particular treaty. The most important we have to keep in mind is the status of India, Pakistan, China, US, and Russia. Now, if you talk about a brief history, that what has led to development of this treaty. So, if you look at the brief history, it is believed that treaty was largely an outcome or result of decades-long arms race that was going between the two superpowers, that was that time Soviet Union and we have the United States. So, if you look at the evolution of the history here, it was the month of July 1945. When the World War II was still going on, United States conducted the world's first successful nuclear weapons. And if you know, if you have read the world history, you will know that it is because of the nuclear weapon or the nuclear attack that happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima region of Japan. Japan surrendered, and that led to the end of World War II. Just 4 years after, somewhere in year 1949, Soviet Union was also able to successfully test their first nuclear weapon. And thus, between 1945 to 1996, almost for 4 decades, we can say that more than 2000 nuclear tests were carried out in the world. Out of that, if you look at the distribution of this nuclear test, the maximum number of nuclear tests was done by United States, where the number stands at 1032, while the 715 of tests was done by the Soviet Union at that time. Apart from that, 3 other countries are there that also have done several successful tests in this time period, where we have Great Britain. It has conducted 45 successful nuclear tests. Then we have the France, which conducted 210 successful tests. And then at third, we have China, which also conducted equal to Great Britain, about 45 successful nuclear tests. Now, when such a huge number of nuclear weapon testing was being done for almost 3-4 decades, the radioactive fallout that was a result of this test caused a lot of criticism from all around the globe. And as a result of this criticism, the international community is concerned about the effects of this continued test kept growing on, and also there was a concern that it will also cause some sort of irreversible catastrophic damage to the environment as well. And as a result of this, several attempts were made to curb the explosive tests that were being done by the countries all across the globe. And in this direction, the first step was taken when in the 1963, under the presidency of John F. Kennedy in the United States, they signed a limited nuclear test ban treaty, also called as LTBT. The main, we can say the content of this treaty was that it basically prohibited nuclear testing in the atmosphere, in the outer space, and underwater. However, under this treaty, still underground nuclear testing were permitted. And if you remember, India has carried out precisely this kind of test, underground test, in the Pokhran region of Rajasthan. And thus, 5 years later in 1968, because still LTBT had a lot of limitations, a new agreement basically was proposed in the United Nations General Assembly, where a comprehensive test ban was discussed during the negotiations of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And despite the discussion that is going on, there are a lot of what we can say differences, divergences among the members of the United Nations, and thus a consensus could not reach, and thus no agreement was reached on any kind of comprehensive test ban issue. However, as the time progressed after 1968, if you look at the later developments, it was in year 1974, because as we have seen in the earlier slides, most of the nuclear weapon testing was being done by United States and erstwhile Soviet Union. So in 1974, again a major breakthrough was achieved when under the presidency of Richard Nixon, we have the signing of Threshold Test Ban Treaty, also called as TTBT, and it established a nuclear threshold where both countries accepted that they will impose a ban on themselves from conducting any nuclear test that would produce a yield exceeding 150 kilotons. 150 kilotons is roughly equivalent to 150,000 tons of what we can say 150,000 tons of the TNT explosion. So you can understand that this was the maximum limit imposed on the yield of nuclear weapon. The mutual restraint thus that was imposed by this threshold test ban treaty reduced the explosive forces of new nuclear warheads and bombs which could otherwise be tested for the weapons system. However, still if we are talking about nuclear weapon testing still continued because none of the treaty are able to completely ban it, and thus a new opportunity came when there was end of the Cold War somewhere in the 1990s. It was 1991 when the Soviet Union broke into different nations, and a major breakthrough came after the Cold War ended and after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. As the geopolitical tensions we have discussed due to the end of Cold War shimmered down between the United States and the Russia, UN took advantage of the situation and adopted finally the comprehensive test ban treaty. And if you look at this main what we can say context of the CTBT, what is the main point of CTBT? So basically it put a blanket ban on the explosive testing of nuclear weapons on September 10th, 1996, and thus it opened for signature on September 24, 1996. Now, if you look at the success, how successful CTBT has been in curbing the nuclear testing, so we can look at the data. Now, it was 1996 when CTBT was first adopted by the United Nations General Assembly, and since the CTBT, total 10 nuclear tests have taken place in the world. If you look at the distribution of this nuclear test, it was the India which conducted 2 nuclear tests in 1998. Then followed by Pakistan, it also conducted 2 nuclear tests in 1998. And as per the recent United Nations report, it is believed that North Korea actually have conducted a series of nuclear tests. First in 2006, then 2009, 2013, then 2016 twice, and then 2017. Also, US has not conducted any nuclear test after the CTBT was adopted. The last test that was conducted by US was in year 1992. China and France have conducted the test in 1996, last test, and Soviet Union has conducted its last test in 1990. Thus, from this, what we can understand that Russia, which became the largest nation after the disintegration of Soviet Union, and basically it is believed that it has inherited most of the legacy of the Soviet Union, including its nuclear arsenal, nuclear technology, and all. It has never conducted a nuclear test after the disintegration. That means Russia came or became a nation in 1991, and since that Russia has never conducted any kind of nuclear test. And if you try to understand that why CTBT has not come into force, the reason is very simple. If you try to look at the Article 14 of the treaty that was adopted by United Nations, it clearly states that total 44 members of United Nations who have access to the nuclear technology or who have nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads, they have to basically sign and ratify this agreement. Then only this agreement can come into force. Then only this treaty can come into force. However, out of the 44 member states, 8 member states still has not either signed or has neither signed nor ratified the treaty. And if you look at the distribution here, we can see that 3 countries have neither signed nor ratified the treaty, who have access to nuclear technology, that is DPRK, that is Democratic People's Republic of Korea or North Korea, India and Pakistan. On the other hand, 5 countries are there who have signed the treaty but still have not ratified the treaty. These countries are China, Egypt, Iran, Israel and USA. So unless and until these 8 countries sign and ratify the treaty, it cannot come into force. Now, interestingly, what we have discussed, that India has refused to sign the treaty. So what is the rationale behind that? So if you look at the rationale of India, it clearly states, if you look at first of all the decision of Government of India, so it was on 20th June 1996 when the Geneva Conference was being held, the Government of India categorically refused to sign the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And later on, the representatives, India's permanent representatives to the United Nations, that time, she gave this statement that the CTBT that we see emerging appears to be shaped by the technological preferences of the nuclear weapons state. That is the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council also we can say, who have access to nuclear technology or who are considered as nuclear weapons state as per the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty NPT as well. So India said that this is largely shaped by the technological preference of the nuclear weapons state rather than the imperatives of the nuclear disarmament. India basically advocates the overall non-proliferation or overall disarmament of the nuclear weapons, nuclear capable states, and thus CTBT that India envisaged in 1954 is something that India cannot become part of, and this cannot be the CTBT that India can be expected to accept as well. And also India has said, and it has maintained its policy, that there was a need for a total disarmament treaty rather than banning the further test after some countries have developed nuclear weapons arsenal and also have proved its capability. It is not fair. There is a need for total disarmament treaty rather than a non-proliferation treaty, and thus otherwise the non-nuclear weapon states were in disadvantageous position vis-a-vis the countries that already had nuclear stockpiles. And especially if we talk about, this is very serious threat to India also, because if India abide by this treaty, China already has developed already had conducted a lot of nuclear tests, and thus it will put India at disadvantageous position, especially when China is basically we can say China is or has tried to capture the Indian land in the past, even during the 1962 war, and claim entire Arunachal Pradesh as its own territory. So this was the rationale given by India for not signing this comprehensive test ban treaty. Now, if you look at the current status, so recently in year 2021, the Secretary General of United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has urged the remaining 8 countries, to ratify the CTBT as soon as possible. And in this regard, he has given the statement that given the necessity and readiness of the treaty, it is both disappointing and frustrating. The treaty has not yet entered into force. And he said, we all know the reason for this. The 8 remaining Annex 2 states whose ratifications are required for the treaty's entry into force, this has not yet been able to achieve. So that is overall brief idea, history and rationale behind the signing of or adopting of such agreement by United Nations, that is comprehensive test ban treaty. Also, one point you can keep in mind that it was basically the non-signing of CTBT that caused a lot of sanctions which was being imposed by especially United States in India during the 1999, especially after the India conducted successful nuclear weapons test under the Prime Ministership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So that time a lot of sanctions are imposed, but later on gradually the sanctions were lifted because the United States realized that India can become a very good partner in almost all the dimensions, whether it is a strategic dimension, whether it is a economic cooperation, whether it is the technological cooperation, and variety of fields. And after that, obviously the relations between India and US has improved quite a lot, where US consider India as a major non-NATO ally. So that is all about this particular video. I hope you understood the concept behind the CTBT and the recent reason why this treaty again has came into news headlines. That is all for this particular video. Thank you very much.